So, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good whatever time it is. We're going on holiday, aren't we, David?
Yes, we are we?
Well, not together. But somebody very learned said to me very, very recently, nobody should ever work in August. And I think the French don't work much in August.
I'm not going there.
We're not really going anywhere because we really are still in a bit of a lockdown, aren't we?
Yeah.
So,
actually, I quite like the French's idea of lunch, which is about 11 till 4 o'clock.
I'm definitely on for that. Definitely on for that. I was never meant to be brought up in the UK. I'm definitely in the Mediterranean. It's where my heart lies. So I am, as ever, Aneesh de Vos. This is the enigma. That is the most ponderful and loved up from his fans. Being naughty, 'cause it's the last one. David, which I know I should do it that way, David Buckler.
I've been swiped. Hello, Anish. Hello, everyone.
On that app, that very special
How
app.
can I follow that introduction again?
I don't know. Just take it, David. Suck it up.
I'll just take it. I was always taught if the compliment is paid, say thank you and move on gracefully.
That's it, like a swan.
Thank you. I'm moving on gracefully.
I would. So, David, we are Community Connections, and one of our main aims is supporting people with trauma, because that allegedly is kind of a specialism for us. And I think today we're going to be short and sweet, but we're going to cover trauma. One of my biggest beefs when people talk about trauma is this focus that the event is traumatic. It's not. It's our response and our perception to that event that is traumatic. And who's to say what one person's trauma is against another person's? And more importantly, who's to judge what one person's trauma is against another person's? We know we're in a world trauma. We know because people are traumatized by it. We've said it before, it's that unusual moment where when we walk into a room, into a therapeutic setting, we have a very, very similar and known experience between ourselves and I call them a companion, other people call them client, patient, whatever it is that people want to say. So we know that we're sharing something. David, I'm going to flip it over to you because you are always the enigma and ponderful. What's your view on trauma? Mine is always, it's the perception and it's the disconnect from ourselves that happen as a coping mechanism.
Yeah, and I heard this at least once today. It is a very normal response to a quite abnormal event. And if it's perceived as that, then I think it puts things more into context. And you're right there. I always find the main obstacle in counselling, in a counselling session, and you're right, what do I call the people I'm involved with in a counselling session? Are they clients? Are we on a journey together? It's a mixture of a lot of that. But the perception.
Have you frozen, David?
I have heard about, and there seems to be this scaling of the event, and as you rightly say, the event, although relevant, cannot be measured against the emotion, the feelings, and the response that go along with it. Yeah. I think that's what you were saying. I almost repeated it in a different way, but it's almost like, that was a bump in the road for me. It's what I know, that's what my life is, and I move on. Yeah. My perception is moving on and moving on and moving on keeps filling this basket of of grief and loss and the trauma just becomes too much to carry around, if it wasn't enough to begin with. And of course, if you wander around with it long enough, it becomes heavier and heavier and heavier.
And can become a way of life, can't it?
Well, exactly. And I guess it's that living in the trauma and living with it becomes somewhat of a norm. But it's a rather sad and upsetting place, and scary, to say the least.
Yeah, because I mean, there's talk in the helping professions now of this big T trauma, small T trauma, or somebody recently said to me, trauma 2. Come on, it's not.
Yeah.
It's either something that you're traumatized by, or there is something that is complex trauma, i.e., as you were saying, that basket that gathers many, many traumas within it, and at the point when it just becomes too heavy to keep picking up. And I mean, and I will always going back to that body reaction. What your mind perceives, your body then reacts to. And so trauma is not just these thoughts that we carry around with us. It's very much about then what happens in the body, this neurobiological response, this hormonal response. And I just think that's really, really important that is recognized. You know, when people say, oh, it's psychological trauma, come on, let's widen that. It's trauma. And it affects you psychologically, and it affects you biologically. And, you know, if you want to take it one step further, you know, if you want to call it spiritual or whatever, but in that existential self, in effect, outside. So this is such a big bag, and it's a bandwagon word at the moment, for sure it is, you know. But I just wanted today just to really kind of pick the bones a little bit of it, because I do me get a tad pissy about things, but I do over this. And, you know, even people who are, you know, within the profession of the psychology world, they're still not always getting it. They're not always getting it. They're not always considering this biological reaction. I mean, ACE's study has really, you know, raised the bar in getting people to understand that these childhood adversities can affect our health in later life. But we also need to be looking at it right now and understanding that, you know, if I were to shout boo to you every day for 40 days, and on the 41st day I didn't, you would still go like that when you saw me, because that, as you said, becomes your normal.
Yeah, and time and time again, very often, when someone expresses how they feel in trauma or after the effects of trauma, it doesn't matter how historical it is. It could have happened 20 years ago or yesterday. It doesn't make any difference. But it's that very, very physical reaction that comes along with the feeling. You know, I was woken up maybe by a dream or by an upset stomach or a tightening or a headache or a numbness, or it's very, very often accompanied by some physiological, if you like, symptom. It's not my favourite word, but for want of a better description, they go hand in hand. So yeah, I have to agree that there's a very physical side to psychological trauma.
And we need to be listening to people's languaging, don't we? You know, I felt it in my gut. Well, you know what? If somebody says to you, I felt it in my gut, ask them how their gut feels. You know, what do you think about that? You know, what do you feel about that? How does that feel in your gut? You know, when I work with people and they'll say something, I'm using that one because it's an easy one, isn't it? Oh, I really felt that in my gut. I was just saying,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you just
No,
want to put
it's
your
a good
hand,
example, nonetheless. Yeah.
put your hand on your stomach.
Mm.
How does that feel there? Because you've then got them to connect in and get that thinking brain, that prefrontal cortex to think in. And it changes the conversation because these bodies need to be heard. You know, dis-ease leads to disease. We know that. We do know that.
Mm.
David, when you are working, I mean, obviously I am a somatic worker, I make no secret of it.
Yeah, yeah.
When you are working, do you think that you have been influenced more as a counsellor by this concept of this somatic response now? Do you think that therapists are becoming more influenced?
Well, you know, the buzzwords out there at the moment are trauma informed.
Oh,
You
love
know,
that one.
okay, what is trauma informed?
Oh,
And I just trauma informed is listening, and the narrative is all important, and part of that narrative is, yeah, I feel like this, physically feel like this,
yeah.
And it's evident. It's not to be ignored, and it's not a separate issue.
It's really not, because I mean, it's nice it'd be, you know, just to be wandering around in our heads all the time, but there is a casing. There is a physical casing that allows that head to wander around and, you know, see the beautiful Lake District, as I like to do. You know, it actually is moving with you. So if we keep disconnecting in how we're approaching people who are coming to us and saying, you know what, I'm kind of, you know, I've experienced this, this, and this. And if we keep just disconnecting and focusing in on what those thoughts are, for sure those thoughts affect the physical responses, for sure they do. But it's got to be, as I often use the term, it's got to be this bottom-up, top-down approach. And equally, you're still getting, you know, there's often divides, isn't there? Because you're still getting the people like, no, you should only treat people, you know, I'm a somatic worker and I do this and blah, blah, blah. And kind of dissing the thought processing. You know, I am trained in CBT and I know it can get a lot of bad press, but it has its place, and it has its place to find out. I use it to find out people's core beliefs. It's really bloody useful. But I also use those core beliefs and, you know, those assumptions and rules that are associated with it. What's going on in your body? You know, what are you feeling? Where does that live? You know, when you ask somebody, and where do you feel that in your body? People are like, oh, well, you know, stomach. 9 times out of 10, people feel this in the stomach. Is it surprising when the studies show that they're saying that the gut now is the second brain? It's got its own, you know, you know, the science is there. I just wonder how long it will take for that science to be. Well, of course, it's going to change every day because science does. I mean, it's only as good at the moment when they find it, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I just wonder how long it's going to be before it spreads to everybody's view. Any thoughts, David?
Well, yeah, I'm sticking with what you just said. I got many thoughts, but yeah, you mentioned the stomach. What is presented to me more often than not is fatigue, sheer fatigue. It's just carrying this around for so long, and living with the very human response to trauma. Yeah, it's no wonder that you would be wiped out by this, physically tired, and you know, okay, there are common symptoms, to trauma, and they are easily identifiable. Whether that is identified by the client, for want of another description, is debatable, but they rarely connect the two. in my experience. So whether the people who should be more aware of that are aware, I don't see it crop up in training very often, unless you specifically go down that route, particularly as applied to, let's say, NHS treatments, the IAP system. You'd be hard pushed digging through the paperwork, digging through the training to find trauma-specific training. So that makes me wonder, what is trauma-informed practice? And trauma-informed practice, as to my own mind, is looking at a person rather than a diagnosis. It's understanding or exploring the fact that they are physically ill, more often than not, as well as emotionally troubled. So I guess that leaves us with the question, are we a ghost in the machine? If you treat the mind, does the body get better? If you treat the body, does the mind get better? Again, I question separating the two.
Yeah, I just, for me, I mean, of course I will get a referral through and I will read that paperwork. Of course I will. It's part of my job, but it's not until I speak to that person. And my question is this: what happened to you?
Yeah.
That's my question.
Yeah, not what's wrong, what happened.
What happened? And there's a lot of debate at the moment, isn't there, about, because trauma is coming up, about, borderline personality disorder for one, ADHD for another, where are these diagnoses coming from when you've got a person sat in front of you who has complex trauma from their childhood? Because their neurology is different, because it forms differently, because you are permanently on a high alert. And when you talk about the fatigue, you bloody are tired, aren't you? Because your body is pumping out this wash of hormones all the time to keep you, as I say, in that meerkat amygdala state, like, oh, here we go.
Yeah. Are you ready to run away or fight?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So,
and on the subject of 2 and 3 letter abbreviations and diagnosis, I am aware of many people are walking around with a personality disorder that
have you frozen, David? I think David was about to tell us something quite profound. You're back again, David.
Sorry?
I'm
back again. Where did I get to?
You got to that there are many people around.
With the diagnosis, with their 2 and 3 letter abbreviations, with their personality disorder, that have never really been listened to. But
exactly,
that terminology fits in the boxes.
Absolutely.
So, by that token, if you have a diagnosis, you can be treated
for trauma. There we go. Let's cut out
by whatever box is ticked.
Yeah, because somehow we have to house these things, don't we? And trauma is so multifaceted.
And I guess I've lost you again.
You have disappeared, David. So I'm gonna carry on chatting a bit about. Oh, you're back. So
I'm back.
You're back. So trauma is so multifaceted.
I think I got to a point where we're talking about diagnosis. and all very well. It ticks the boxes. It fits within the model, which is another subject entirely. Because if you don't fit the model, then you don't get treated, as far as IAPT is concerned.
Yeah.
But having said that, I know counsellors who were in that system that are probably frustrated by it, because, and we come full circle, it's working with a diagnosis, it's not working with the person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I come back to the narrative. Yeah. Where are you basing any fact? Where are you basing treatment?
Yeah.
If the full story is not being heard.
Where's the duty of care?
Yeah.
It's a tough one, isn't it? And I mean, I also am a huge, as you know, believer in, let's hear about what the pregnancy was like. Let's hear about what the birth was like. All of these things. And again, birth is a chemical response. Chemical things happen in birth. So I won't go right into it, but they do. And if that birth is any way stop-start because of anxiety, etc., these things then affect the chemical response and the birthing process. So again, this business of, oh, people don't remember anything from before they're 2. Well, they might not explicitly, but they do implicitly. So it's, one of the things I do think is that I think that the change is here. The fact that we're having this conversation, the change is here. How that change happens and how hard it is to pull people through the change, because I think sometimes we're going to have to pull and sometimes push, I don't know. But I do think that the change is here. And, let's hope, because we always bring a bit of hope, don't we, David? Let's hope that when we look back at this pandemic and the studies, that change can be brought through a little bit more, because it's so en masse. I mean, it literally is, everybody has experienced this together. As I said before, there's no Switzerland. You can't say, I'm not,
No.
So maybe it's time then, it's that timely thing that we can look and say, hang on, we've got such a wide area, i.e. the whole world. Let's see what the effects are. Let's hope that they look at it differently.
Yeah, the operative word being differently. Someone's going to come up with, I'm just banging on about diagnosis again here, and I guess it's all part of the same issue. Someone will come up with a post-COVID diagnosis or something like that. And it's going to happen. And there's going to be more and more people, I guess, who are going to suffer and end up in a system, regardless of whether the treatment is out of diagnosis or.
We've got to find a way to get it to fit, haven't we?
Changing attitude. I see it from within the profession itself, and it's about time.
It is. It's timely. So, David, on that note, we are, as usual, a little bit arsy about diagnosis, because it's time for change, and it is time for change. But we're also quite hopeful. We're quite hopeful that the change is here, because, like I say, we're having the conversations now. The arguments are going on social media about
it. There's lots of similar conversations going on, which is encouraging.
Yeah, and some very eminent academics having these arguments, and you know what? Bloody good. Really glad they are. But also, those arguments don't just need to stay in the academic world. You know,
No,
the general
no.
public needs to be having this questioning. Why have you given
Yeah,
me
yeah.
diagnosis?
It's no good screaming in a vacuum.
No,
It needs to get out there. Yeah.
definitely does. And hopefully, in some small way, that's what you and I and our guests have done,
Mm.
to kind of open this up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, David, August off, back in September. What do you think?
Yeah. As you say, and you were quite well informed that who works in August.
I love that person for telling me that. Made me feel
Yeah.
so much lighter.
Well, I do.
And I love,
We'll break for a while as far as this is concerned, and come back refreshed.
yes, with different people chatting about different things. Though I wonder if we are ever going to top Liz and her vagina dialogues and talking bollocks.
Mm.
I just enjoy saying it, if I'm honest. I am a 5-year-old.
Mm. On that note, can't wait for your 6th birthday.
I might get there. I don't know. I haven't decided yet.
Yeah, I think I'm a little more advanced than that. My partner often refers to me as being 12, so I guess a little bit older.
You're further along than me, my love. That must be why you're so kind to me. This kind of naughty little sister that keeps popping up and saying words such as pissy and things like that. I've been really polite through the whole series, actually. We all know I'm much more wash your mouth out with soap.
Never change.
Not going to. I'm going to remain 5 forever. David, do you know what? Thank you for a good run. Thank you.
And thank you. There's a lot goes on behind this, I know, and you've chased and corralled some very, very wonderful people, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Even if it's just joining in from my point of view, but it's been immense fun, and it's provoked a lot of thought. For me personally, I hope people watching will have had a similar experience.
Yeah, we really hope, and genuinely we hope that. And the people that have come on and spoken to us have just been brilliant. And we will never forget Carolyn, who is one of us in any case on Community Connections, and her bloody teeth in the garden. And so Carolyn, if you're watching, thank you for the teeth. Should we go over and out before we get even worse?
I think it's appropriate. Take care.
Take care, everybody. See you in September. Bye.